The rain fell like a silver curtain, soft yet persistent, blurring the edges of the world as Adeline stepped off the bus, her leather bag slung over her shoulders, heavy with everything she had carried across 3 weeks of absence. The smell of wet earth mingled with the scent of the city behind her, a blend of something familiar and something she had been aching to reclaim. Every step toward Birch Lane was measured, deliberate. But her heart thrummed like a drum in her chest, each beat a reminder of the home she had left behind, and the unknown she was about to confront. She had spent 3 weeks tending to her mother, boiling herbs, whispering prayers into the night while the city slept, but in her mind, the images of her children, her house, her life waiting back home, had never left her. She had pictured this moment countless times. The thrill of opening the door and being swallowed by the warmth of family, the smell of home, the soft chaos of children who had missed her. And yet, when she reached the compound at the end of Birch Lane, the world did not welcome her. It tested her. It challenged everything she believed she had built. Her bags lay in the rain, darkened, soaked through, scattered on the red earth as though someone had left them there intentionally, like a silent message. Her children were huddled beside them, small figures of dignity and sorrow in the drizzle. Iris stood taller, squared, jaw tight, eyes red. The image of someone forced to grow too quickly. Beckett sat on the smallest bag, knees drawn to his chest, the puddles forming around him reflecting the dim streetlights. Little Ren clung to his sister, silent, exhausted, his tiny face pressed against her dress. For a moment Adeline's mind refused to process, then shattered into fragments of disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. She ran to them, dropped to her knees, wrapped him into her arms, and let the rain mix with the tears she did not bother to hide. She could feel the cold seep in through their clones, through their bones, and it ignited something ferocious inside her. She would not allow this to be the story of their lives. Not tonight. The door of her house opened with deliberate slowness, and the warm light spilled out, cutting through the drizzle like a spotlight on her humiliation. And there they were. Rowan, the man she had once trusted with her life, and a woman she did not recognize, draped against his arm as though she belonged there. As though the life Adeline had could be taken and claimed by someone else. Rowan's face was flat, expressionless, the absence of shame striking like a physical blow. He spoke words that were meant to wound, to assert dominance, to make her doubt her own worth. She could take the children and leave if she wished. But the home, the life, the space she had nurtured for 9 years belonged to him now. She looked at him, then at the woman, and then at the rain falling gently around her, and she felt something lift in her chest. Not fear, not surrender, but clarity. They had tried to humiliate her, to break her, to make her doubt herself. But she knew her ground was never truly theirs to claim. She turned slowly, gathering Ren, taking Beckett's hand, watching Iris lift the bags without a word, and walked away from the house, the rain following them, almost tenderly, as if it recognized the injustice and wished to wash it away. Beckett's small voice broke the silence, telling her of the old woman at the crossroads. The one who had seen her coming, who had whispered that she would need guidance. The crossroads had always carried an air of quiet unease, but tonight it became a place of arrival, a sanctuary where answers waited. The old woman Edith sat by a fire that rain could not touch, her presence ancient and unshakable. She offered warmth, both physical and spiritual, giving the children a thick, sweet-smelling broth, and letting Adeline feel a loosening in her chest she hadn't realized she needed. Edith handed her a clay pot, sealed with wax and bound with cord, telling her it contained truth waiting for the right moment. It was not magic, she said. It was simply truth, and when the moment came, it would breathe life back into what had been stolen from her. That night, Adeline slept in Edith's home with her children close, listening to their breaths, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, and everything that could still happen. In the early dawn, before the village fully stirred, Sterling arrived. A man from her past, someone whose presence commanded quiet authority, came not to interfere but to offer assistance. To restore dignity to the children who had slept on mats, cold and neglected, while she was humiliated in the rain. Sterling did not rush, did not intrude. Simply offered help, subtle and deliberate, the kind of help that came from someone who understood true power was quiet, steady, and unyielding. Together, they began to set plans in motion. Rowan, the man who had believed himself untouchable, was unaware that the wheels of justice and truth were already turning. Adeline carried herself with the certainty of someone who had been tested, someone whose character had been tempered in fire. She was not moving blindly, every action, every glance, every step was deliberate. She had learned, over 3 weeks, over 9 years, that life would test her. That people would attempt to take what she held most dear. But she had also learned that preparation, patience, and quiet persistence were the keys to reclaiming power. Documents were collected, evidence presented, names confirmed. Every step of the way, she moved with a precision that left no space for error, no room for doubt, no way for Rowan or Celeste to manipulate the narrative. The Council of Marin, the arbiters of the village, witnessed the truth unfold, carefully, deliberately, without the theatrics Rowan had assumed were necessary. Original documents, verified signatures, eyewitnesses, all confirmed that Rowan's claim to the property was fraudulent. Adeline's name was restored. Justice moved quietly, like a river eroding stone, inevitable and unstoppable. And yet, even as the council acted, Adeline held the clay pot close, sealed, waiting. Not for revenge, not for power, but for the right moment to unlock the truth that would cement her freedom and affirm her choices. In the morning, Rowan was exposed, stripped of claim. His presence hollow and defeated. Celeste vanished, leaving only absence behind the one honesty she had offered. Adeline, standing at the gate of her reclaimed home, iron key in hand, watched as the village came alive around her, as people offer help, as kindness returned in subtle, deliberate gestures. She scrubbed the floors herself, feeling each motion as reclamation, as a declamation that she was present, unbroken, and unyielding. Beckett wrapped his small arms around her from behind, a quiet confirmation that safety, warmth, and love were restored. Sterling arrived with small offerings, respectful, distant yet present, and the understanding between them needed no words. The rain, soft, gentle, persistent, fell once more, washing the streets, the earth, the sky, and every lingering trace of humiliation, leaving only clarity, purpose, and the affirmation of a life reclaimed. Adeline looked at her children, at the home she had built, at the streets of Marin that bore witness to her endurance, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled, not in performance, not for others, but for herself. She had been tested, she had been humiliated, she had been forced to step into the storm, and yet she had emerged not only intact but stronger, wiser, empowered. The rain that had tried to break her had baptized her. The crossroads had guided her. Edith's pot had waited, patiently, for the moment when her resolve and clarity aligned. Luxury, she realized, was not the house, the material wealth, or the appearances of success. Luxury was the freedom to move with certainty, to claim what was rightfully yours, to protect those you love, to act with deliberate intention, and to know that every challenge, every betrayal, every storm was temporary when met with courage, intelligence, and unyielding self-belief. That day, as the sun began to set, painting the sky with colors of fire and gold, Adeline and her children stood at the gate of their reclaimed home. The village had returned. Quietly, offering help, offering acknowledgement, offering the subtle affirmation that truth, when pursued with patience and care, could not be denied. And in that quiet evening, with rain still falling gently around them, she understood that her story was not defined by the humiliation, the betrayal, or the rain. It was defined by the choices she had made, the courage she had mustered, and the knowledge that she had never been without ground, never without power, never without herself. She had returned home, and this time the home belonged entirely to her. Morning came quietly over Marin. the kind of light that slipped softly through the curtains, turning the house into a warm, golden sanctuary. Adeline stirred first, carefully setting Wren down on the soft mat before stretching her arms, feeling hardly used in the tense hours relax as the sunlight poured in. The smell of wet earth from last night's rain lingered, clean and alive, a reminder that even storms passed and growth followed. Iris had already moved to the kitchen, her hands working with the precision of someone learning, not just skill but discipline, preparing tea and light breakfast for her siblings. Beckett had wandered into the side yard, drawn to the mango tree like a magnet, while little Wren played quietly with a worn wooden toy, content in the sense of safety his mother's presence offered. Adeline looked at them and felt a wave of clarity wash over her. This was not a return to what had been, but the beginning of something greater. She had survived humiliation, betrayal and cold calculation, and had emerged stronger, more deliberate, and more aware of her own power than ever before. Luxury, she reminded herself, was not in the furniture, not in the silk gowns, not even in the curated artworks around the house. Luxury was in the freedom to decide, in the ability to create, to protect, to move through the world with purpose, influence, and control. And she had claimed it. Sterling arrived mid-morning, his presence steady and unassuming. The quiet authority of a man who had seen the value of preparation and timing. He carried a small leather portfolio and a bag of simple gifts for the children. Gestures of care without ceremony, the kind of sophistication that spoke of power tempered with respect. He didn't enter the house. Instead, he waited at the gate, a silent partner in the reclamation of what had been hers all along. Adeline met him there, exchanging a look that needed no words. The subtle acknowledgement between them was suffused with understanding. Some battles were fought with documents and evidence, others with patience, presence, and quiet determination. Rowan, of course, was not idle. The word of Sterling's arrival spread quick through the village, and with it, the whispers of someone who could challenge, who could act quietly yet decisively. Rowan had counted on fear, on intimidation, on the assumption that Adeline would bend under the weight of betrayal. He had forgotten that she had spent 9 years building not just a life but a resolve, a strategy, a self that did not break under pressure. Adeline spent the morning in deliberate preparation, checking documents, confirming witness statement, and ensuring that every detail of her case was airtight. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Luxury was as much in patience as it was in power. Time, she understood, was one of the most refined forms of wealth, a currency the unprepared could never fully measure. By noon, the village had begun to notice changes. Neighbors who had once peeked from behind curtains, wary and silent, now approached with quiet assistance, a fresh loaf of bread, help with cleaning the porch, advice about procedures she might not have considered. There was no noise, no ostentation, just the subtle, steady accumulation of support that comes when respect is earned, not demanded. Adeline observed all of it calmly, understanding that true luxury was the ability to command respect without raising your voice, to shape outcomes without theatrics, to achieve influence with patience and poise. And then came the council meeting. The elders convened under the wide umbrella tree, the traditional center of decision-making in Marin, where every word carried weight, and every action was observed carefully. Adeline, Iris, and Sterling arrived with documents meticulously prepared. Rowan and Celeste also appeared, but there was already a shift in the energy. The confident arrogance Celeste carried in the rainy night had dimmed. Rowan's composure, impenetrable, showed the first cracks. The council began with verification of land registration, cross-referencing dates, confirming signatures, and consulting witnesses who had long been part of the village's memory. Every detail was precise, every fact undeniable. Sterling remained quiet, observing, occasionally offering guidance in subtle whispers to Adeline. She moved with purpose, presenting her case with clarity and confidence, her voice steady and deliberate. She was not angry, though anger had its place. She was not seeking vengeance, though the temptation existed. She was claiming what had always been hers, asserting her presence in a world that sometimes tried to rewrite history for convenience. The council's scrutiny was thorough. The elders weighed the evidence, compared the forged documents, confirmed the legitimacy of the original registration, and examined the duplicity of the signatures Rowan and Celeste had presented. Adeline watched them work, her mind calm, her chest steady. She understood the power of patience, of evidence, of timing, and she had mastered it. The children were present, quiet but aware, absorbing the gravity of the moment. Iris held the envelope her grandfather had given her years ago. The letter confirming her mother's claim to the land, a tangible symbol of inheritance, legacy, and the wisdom of foresight. When Vera, the eldest council member, read the letter aloud, the weight of the words pressed on everyone present. The truth was undeniable. The forged signatures, the deceit, the manipulations, they could no longer hold against the force of evidence and legacy. Rowan shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado eroded by the meticulous unfolding of the truth. Celeste's face paled, the calculated coolness she had once wielded now fragile, exposed. The council deliberated briefly, then declared Adeline's claim restored, Rowan's claim null and void, the fraudulent actions recorded and referred to the proper authorities. Justice, precise and deliberate, had been served. Adeline, still calm, reached for the clay pot Edith had given her. She pressed her thumb against the wax seal. The crack of it breaking was subtle but profound, a small, ritualistic acknowledgement of timing, patience, and truth. Inside, the iron key and the folded from her father confirmed that she had never been without power, never been without ground. She held it for a moment, letting the weight of history, wisdom, and foresight settle over her. Luxury, she thought, was the ownership of one's destiny, the cultivation of self, and the awareness that no storm, betrayal, or humiliation could diminish the value of a life lived with intention. Rowan left Marin quietly 2 weeks later, his presence no longer a threat, his ambitions thwarted by the inevitability of truth. Celeste vanished, leaving only absence behind, a reminder that deception is fleeting when faced with patience and deliberate action. Adeline's house was restored. Floors scrubbed by her own hands. The familiar sense returned, the warmth of her family restored. The village, once silent witnesses to humiliation, now moved with subtle support, helping, repairing, and acknowledging the power of her presence. Beckett, Iris, and Wren thrived in the space of security and affirmation. Sterling's presence remained, a quiet, steady force. Not intrusive but always supportive. Adeline understood that true wealth was not material alone. It was the freedom to act with certainty, to reclaim one's space, to protect loved ones, and to move through life without fear of betrayal. She watched the rain fall softly outside. The gentle drizzle reminiscent of the storm she had survived. But now it felt like a blessing, a baptism, a confirmation that she had emerged stronger, unbroken, and in control. That day, she walked through the house with her children, each room a testament to endurance, each corner a reminder of the choices she had made and the victories she had earned. She did not rush, she did not boast. She simply moved with deliberate grace, aware that luxury was not in display but in mastery, in freedom, in the cultivation of a life that reflected her values and determination. By evening, the sun dipped low, casting amber light across the compound. Adeline, children in tow, watched the city beyond Marin awaken, in the glow, a metaphor for her own awakening. The dawn of a life reclaimed, redefined, and reimagined. Sterling offered a simple nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, and she returned it, understanding that some alliances need no explanation, no ceremony, only trust earned through action and presence. The rain began again, soft, gentle, persistent, and she let it fall, letting it wash away any remaining shadows of fear, humiliation, or doubt. Adeline had returned home. She had found her children safe, her house restored, her dignity reclaimed. And she had discovered that the true luxury of life is not what is handed to you, but what you claim through courage, patience, and relentless determination. The morning after the council's decision was crisp and calm, the kind of dawn that makes the air feel alive with possibilities. Adeline rose before the sun, moving quietly through her house. The smell of polished floors, citrus soap, and the soft aroma of the kitchen herbs she had begun to stock again filled her senses. Her children were still asleep, each one tucked in the spaces she had reclaimed, their breathing steady and untroubled. There was a rhythm in this house now, a rhythm she had authored, and it carried a power that no man, no storm, no betrayal could undo. She stepped onto the porch, the iron key hanging lightly from her fingers, a reminder that the land beneath her feet was hers, not by luck, not by mercy, but by foresight and courage. She allowed herself a moment to breathe in the morning, letting the sun's warmth touch her shoulders, the light refracting off the dewy leaves in the yard. Every detail, the cracked porch step, the mango tree, the red door, was no longer a mark of humiliation but a testament to endurance, to patience and to careful planning. Luxury, she realized, was in reclaiming the ordinary and making it extraordinary through intention. By mid-morning, the village began to stir in a new rhythm. Neighbors who had once been silent witnesses approached, offering small gestures of care, a basket of fresh fruit, freshly baked bread, an extra set of linens for the children. Adeline received each gift with calm gratitude, knowing that wealth of spirit often multiplied when generosity was mirrored. She moved among her people not as a victim, not as someone seeking validation, but as a woman who had regained her authority over her life, her home, and her future. Sterling arrived again quietly, as he always did. His presence carried a subtle weight, a luxury that was not loud or ostentatious but firm, deliberate, and profoundly comforting. He didn't enter the house this time either, waiting at the gate with a small bundle of gifts for the children, each wrapped with care. He understood that real wealth was measured not in extravagance but in presence, in timing, in knowing when to act and when to wait. "Good morning," Adeline said, her voice calm, carrying the serenity of someone who had faced the storm and emerged victorious. Sterling nodded, acknowledging both her greeting and the unspoken understanding that some battles were fought without words, some alliances maintained without ceremony. Together, they watched the children play under the mango tree. Beckett climbed higher than usual, testing his courage. Iris organized games with precision and leadership, and Wren toddled after them, laughter filling the spaces of the house she had reclaimed. Adeline smiled, realizing that luxury was in these moments safety, presence, joy, and control over the environment she nurtured. She moved through the day with quiet purpose, overseeing repairs, coordinating the repainting of the walls, and restoring furniture with her own hands. Each action was deliberate, a reinforcement of her authority and mastery on the space. The house, once a stage for betrayal, was now a sanctuary of intentionality. Rowan's presence in the village became a study in discomfort. The people who had once feared confrontation now observed with quiet scrutiny. The whisper of Sterling's vigilance spread subtly. No dramatic confrontation was necessary. His strategic discretion and Adeline's deliberate calmness created an environment where deceit could no longer thrive. Luxury, she reflected, was the ability to cultivate power without noise, to shape outcomes while maintaining grace. By the afternoon, news of the council's decision had spread further. The village understood that a wrong had been righted, that truth had been recognized, and that deceit had consequences. Adeline moved among the neighbors, coordinating assistance for her household, ensuring that the children's schooling, nutrition and comfort were prioritized. She met with the village master, discussing not just property matters but the potential for community projects, spaces for children to learn, gardens to cultivate, and homes to restore. Luxury, she realized, was an influence applied wisely, in the power to enact meaningful change. Sterling observed quietly, providing subtle support. His presence a reminder that alliances were not only protective but empowering. In the late afternoon, Adeline sat with Iris and Beckett, guiding them through their studies under the shade of the mango tree. Wren played nearby, occasionally looking up to ensure her mother's watchful gaze had not wandered. They were not simply reclaiming a home, they were cultivating legacy, nurturing resilience, and learning that control over one's environment and knowledge of one's rights were forms of wealth, more enduring than gold. Evening fell with a softness that reflected the calm Adeline had created. The sky burned orange and pink, and the air held the scent of the wet earth from the rain that had baptized her triumph weeks before. She sat on the porch, watching her children, feeling the weight of their trust in her. Sterling approached, carrying a small, beautifully wrapped package of fresh pastries and fruits, a quiet symbol of shared care. A gesture of wealth expressed in thoughtfulness rather than extravagance. She accepted it with a nod, acknowledging both the gift and the respect behind it. They stood there, the distance measured, intentional, as two people who won of presence without ceremony. The night deepened, and Adeline returned inside. She inspected every corner, ensuring that each room reflected not just cleanliness but her authority. Luxury, she realized fully now, was in attention to detail. In the deliberate shaping of one's environment, in asserting control without aggression. Rowan's absence became more apparent. The house that had been his illusion of power was now a testament to Adeline's deliberate reclaiming. His attempts at influence had been rendered irrelevant by truth, preparation, and strategy. The children slept, and Adeline remained awake, reviewing documents, planning the next steps for security, for financial management, for education, for cultivating influence. Luxury was in foresight, in preparation, in cultivating an environment where safety, comfort, and opportunity coexisted. Sterling's support was quiet, unobtrusive, yet powerful. Together, they discussed future plans for the property, for investment, for community projects, for expanding influence not through noise but through deliberate, intelligent action. Adeline reflected on her journey, the humiliation, the betrayal, the rain, the powerlessness she had felt, all were now lessons, fuel for the life she was creating. Luxury was not in reaction, but in mastery, in understanding timing, strategy, influence, and presence. Over the next few days, the restoration of the property continued. Community members arrived with offerings, labor, and support. Not because they were commanded, but because respect and trust had been earned. The house became a hub not just for family, but for strategy, planning, education, and empowerment. Adeline moved through her days with grace, each decision deliberate, each action reinforcing her authority. The children thrived, learning resilience, strategy, and confidence in the environment their mother had reclaimed. Sterling became a silent partner, offering insight and support. His influence a reminder that true wealth was measured in intelligence, timing, and presence rather than ostentation. Luxury, Adeline now understood, was freedom. Freedom from fear, from manipulation, from the constraints others attempted to impose. Luxury was mastery over one's environment, mastery over influence, mastery over decisions and outcomes. She allowed herself moments of quiet reflection, moments to watch the sunset, moments to feel the rain, moments to simply exist in a space of power, safety, and deliberate beauty. Rowan's absence was felt as a relief rather than a threat. Celeste's disappearance was confirmation that deceit cannot endure when met with patience, strategy, and deliberate action. By the end of the week, the property had been fully restored. Floors gleamed, furniture was organized, the garden bloomed, and the household operated with the precision and harmony of a space under intentional leadership. Adeline's children moved freely, laughing, learning, and exploring with confidence and security. Sterling visited occasionally, always with discretion, offering subtle guidance, education opportunities, and support for community initiatives. Adeline's life had transformed. The humiliation of the rain, the betrayal, the loss she once feared, all were now chapters in a story of triumph, empowerment, and strategic victory. Luxury was not in wealth displayed, but in control, foresight, legacy, and deliberate action. The village of Marin watched quietly, understanding that a woman who claims her ground, who masters timing, strategy, and influence, does so with an authority that cannot be undermined by deceit, fear, or intimidation. Adeline had reclaimed not just her property, but her identity, her family's security, her influence, and her freedom. And in that reclamation, she found the true essence of a life with power, purpose, and deliberate sophistication. The rain returned that evening, soft and tender, falling on the house she had rebuilt, on the children she had protected, on the land that was always hers. She stood on the porch, letting it touch her shoulders, letting it remind her that storms, though they come, pass, and that every storm leaves behind clarity, growth, and the opportunity to reclaim what is rightfully yours. Luxury was not what had been taken, luxury was what had been reclaimed. She looked at her children and smiled, real, deep, earned. The future awaited, not as something given, but as something claimed, one deliberate step at a time. And in that quiet moment, Adeline understood fully that her story, her power, and her life were hers alone, grounded in truth, patience, and the enduring luxury of freedom. The morning light spilled across the red earth of Marin, illuminating the house Adeline had reclaimed with such deliberate care. It was more than a home now. It was a symbol, a fortress of patience, strategy, and quiet power. She rose early as always, her routine refined to a rhythm of purpose. The children were awake, eager and energetic, their laughter spilling into the open spaces of the house, as if the walls themselves celebrated their restored security. Beckett ran to the mango tree immediately, climbing higher than he ever had before. Iris arranged her studies on the veranda, her small desk orderly and precise. And Wren toddled behind Adeline, one hand holding her mother's, the other clutching a small bundle of toys that had survived the storm. Adeline's gaze moved over them all with pride. But it was not the pride of possession. It was the pride of protection, of guidance, of ensuring that no external force could ever diminish their freedom again. Sterling had returned quietly, as he always did, standing at the edge of the property. Not intruding, yet fully present, he carried with him documents, plans, and resources, not as charity but as collaboration. They spoke in hushed tones about future investments, education plans for the children, and ways to safeguard their property and their family's legacy. Luxury, Adeline reflected, was not ostentation. It was foresight, strategy, influence, and security, the ability to build a life that no storm could threaten. By mid-morning, the compound buzzed with activity. Local craftsmen and neighbors came, not out of obligation, but out of respect and trust. Repairs were finalized with precision. Gardens were replanted, and the walls were repainted in warm, welcoming hues that reflected not only taste but command of space. Each action reinforced Adeline's authority, her deliberate attention to detail becoming the subtle, quiet luxury of a life fully reclaimed. Rowan's absence remained a muted presence. The village whispered, but no one dared to approach. His attempts at control had been nullified not through anger, but through strategy, patience, and evidence. The house, the land, and the children were beyond his reach, and the lesson was clear: influence grounded in deceit could not withstand truth. Celeste's disappearance had been another quiet testament to this. Luxury, Adeline thought, was the ability to shape outcomes without raising your voice, to move strategically while others acted impulsively. That afternoon, Adeline met with Sterling under the shade of the mango tree, discussing investments that could transform the compound into both a sanctuary and a center of opportunity for the community. They explored educational programs for the children, sustainable gardens, and avenues for local trade that respected tradition while creating modern opportunity. Sterling's insights were calm, calculated, and practical, another example of wealth that was measured not in gold or jewels, but in influence, timing, and impact. Adeline's thoughts drifted to her own journey, the humiliation in the rain, the betrayal she had endured, and the patience it had taken to reach this point. She realized that luxury was as much internal as it was external. The calm certainty of knowing your rights, your value, and your capacity to reclaim what was yours. Night fell softly, the kind of night that wrapped the village in quiet introspection. Adeline sat on her porch, watching the shadows of the children playing under the mango tree, listening to the wind rustle the leaves with a deliberate, gentle rhythm. Sterling approached, carrying small gifts for the children, a gesture of quiet care and respect. Adeline received him with a calm nod, acknowledging the thought without words. The luxury of their interaction lay in the simplicity, in the deliberate restraint, in the acknowledgement that some power need not be loud to be undeniable. In the days that followed, Adeline's life continued to expand in influence and opportunity. She oversaw the creation of a small library in the village, ensuring her children and their peers had access to books, knowledge, and inspiration. She met with local traders, developing sustainable plans for agriculture and commerce that honored tradition while introducing growth and opportunity. Luxury, she understood now, was in legacy, the creation of systems, education, and structures that would outlast any individual, any storm, any betrayal. Rowan's memory faded into insignificance, replaced by the practical and deliberate expansion of a life reclaimed and mastered. The children thrived. Iris took on leadership roles in her school. Beckett pursued his love of climbing and exploration with confidence, and Wren's curiosity blossomed under the protection and guidance of her mother's strategic oversight. Each child carried with them lessons in resilience, foresight, and the quiet power of deliberate action, the true inheritance of luxury. Weeks turned into months. Adeline's compound became a hub of both family life and community influence. The mango trees bore fruit, the walls gleamed, the gardens flourished, and the children's laughter became the soundtrack of a home fully restored. Sterling remained a subtle presence, offering insights, guidance, and resources while respecting Adeline's autonomy. Together, they navigated opportunities, investments, and initiatives that strengthened both the family's position and the village's well-being. Luxury, Adeline reflected, was in this balance: power without domination, influence without spectacle, presence without intrusion. One morning, as the sun rose in a blaze of gold over the red earth, Adeline walked through the property, each corner now restored and transformed by her care. She felt the steady weight of the iron key in her hand, a symbol not only of ownership but of the deliberate journey she had taken to reclaim her life. Every flower, every repaired step, every polished surface was a testament to patience, courage, and strategic action. The children joined her, energetic and curious, each carrying a piece of the life she had rebuilt. Sterling arrived, carrying plans for expanding the library and community garden, his presence a quiet but constant support. Adeline smiled, understanding fully that luxury was the ability to shape your life and legacy with intention, grace, and foresight. Rowan's absence remained a distant memory, his attempts at influence rendered irrelevant by truth, strategy, and patience. Celeste's disappearance was final, her deceit no longer a shadow over anyone's life. Adeline's home, her family, and her legacy were secure. She watched her children play under the mango trees, the sun warm on their skin, the breeze carrying a sense of possibility. Luxury was in this freedom, security, influence, and the deliberate cultivation of an environment where opportunity and growth were guaranteed, and betrayal could no longer penetrate. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky blazed with colors of fire and gold, Adeline stood on the porch, watching her family and her community thrive. She allowed herself a smile, deep and earned, the kind that comes not from wealth displayed but from a life reclaimed, mastered, and lived deliberately. Sterling approached, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. Adeline nodded, her eyes reflecting the strength, clarity, and power she had cultivated over months of patience and action. "We did it," she corrected. Luxury was not a solitary achievement. It was the culmination of deliberate action, strategic alliances, and the empowerment of those around you. That night, as the moon rose and the stars reflected on the red earth, Adeline's children slept soundly, the house hummed with life, and the property stood as a monument to patience, truth, and strategic power. Luxury was not in what had been taken from her. Luxury was in what she had reclaimed, in what she had built, and in the legacy she would leave behind. Rowan would not return. Celeste would not be seen again. Adeline, her children, and her allies had secured not only property but dignity, influence, and a life designed with intention. The soft rain fell again the following morning, brushing the compound with the gentleness that had once been a witness to humiliation. This time it was a witness to triumph. Adeline stood on the porch, watching it fall, understanding fully that she had mastered her story, her life, and her legacy. Luxury, true luxury, was not in gold or jewels, it was in power reclaimed, influence cultivated, and the deliberate shaping of a life that no storm, no betrayal, and no deceit could ever undermine. And in that clarity, Adeline smiled. For she was truly, finally, free. Morning in Marin came with a soft golden light, spilling across the compound Adeline had reclaimed with patience and strategy. The air was thick with the scent of earth and mango blossoms. But beneath it was the unmistakable energy of renewal. The kind of energy that comes only after storms have passed, only after battles are quietly, decisively won. Adeline rose early, as always, walking barefoot across the polished stone path that led from the porch to the main garden. She carried a small notebook in her hand, one she had filled over the past weeks with plans for the children, for the home, for the community. Each page was deliberate, a record of intention and foresight, because she had learned that luxury and influence were built not in haste or noise, but in patience and consistent action. Beckett tumbled out of the house in pursuit of the morning sun, his laughter filling the air as he climbed the mango tree with fearless precision. Iris followed, neatly arranging schoolbooks and scrolls she had copied from the small library Adeline had established. Wren toddled behind them, giggling at the shadows cast by the early sun, her tiny feet barely touching the warm earth. Adeline paused and breathed in the scene, feeling the hum of life around her. Every detail had been restored and elevated. The walls of the house now gleamed in warm ivory tones, the furniture carefully placed to honor both beauty and practicality. The garden flourished with fruits and flowers chosen for both aesthetic and nourishment. Luxury, she thought, was not decoration. It was the cultivation of an environment where life, growth, and opportunity could thrive, free from intrusion and chaos. Sterling arrived just as she finished her morning inspection, carrying parcels of seeds, books, and plans for future investments. His presence was steady, respectful, and deliberate, the luxury of someone who understands that influence is earned, not demanded. They met under the shade of the mango trees, speaking in hushed tones, discussing ways to secure the children's education, expand their holdings, and create opportunities for the community. Adeline listened, considered, and acted. Every plan was not just about her own prosperity, but about building a life that could not be shaken, a legacy that could not be undermined. As the sun rose higher, the villagers began to stir, drawn by the quiet energy radiating from the compound. Unlike the day she had returned to find her bags abandoned in the rain, the villagers now came voluntarily, bringing gifts of food, offering hands to help in the gardens, volunteering their skills to repair or enhance parts of the property. Their gestures were small but meaningful, proof of a community recognizing strength, strategy, and integrity. The children moved among them naturally, comfortable in the presence of people who had once been distant or indifferent. Adeline watched and allowed herself a quiet satisfaction. She had reclaimed not just her home, but her standing, her respect, and her influence in the community. Rowan's absence was complete. He had been seen leaving the village quietly, the weight of exposure and failure pressing down him in ways that money, influence, or charm could never undo. Celeste had vanished as well, leaving only whispers and lessons in her wake. Neither could harm what had been deliberately reclaimed. That evening, as the sky turned shades of gold and crimson, Adeline gathered her children on the porch. Beckett leaned against her side, Iris held her hand, and Wren rested her small head against her shoulder. Sterling watched from the garden, quiet and deliberate, offering presence without intrusion. Adeline reflected on the journey, the weeks of fear and humiliation, the nights spent planning and protecting, the community that had alternately hidden and supported, the allies and truths that had arrived at precisely the right moments. Luxury, she realized, was not just material comfort or wealth. It was the deliberate cultivation of power, of autonomy, of influence, of dignity, and of a life so carefully designed that no betrayal, no storm, no act of malice could ever diminish it. The next morning, they held a small ceremony in the garden. Villagers and friends were invited. Not for celebration in the traditional sense, but to witness the assertion of legacy and empowerment. Adeline handed the iron key to her eldest child, Iris, explaining that ownership and responsibility were not just about land or home. They were about integrity, foresight, and the protection of what is valuable. Beckett was entrusted with a small portfolio of investments and opportunities for the future, teaching him early about strategy, patience, and resilience. Even little Wren was given responsibilities, small but deliberate, to instill confidence and the understanding that agency begins at any age. Sterling offered guidance and mentorship, helping the family navigate new ventures while respecting the autonomy Adeline had fought so hard to secure. Together, they transformed the compound into a center of influence, education, and prosperity, blending tradition with innovation. Word of Adeline's restoration of property and authority spread beyond Marin. Invitations arrived from nearby villages and regional leaders, seeking her counsel, her insight, her strategic mind. She accepted selectively, always mindful of maintaining balance, always ensuring that influence and luxury were exercised with integrity and foresight. Rowan's attempts to regain any foothold were irrelevant. The lesson was clear, and it resonated throughout the region: power built on deceit, theft, or intimidation cannot withstand patience and strategic action. Months passed, and the compound evolved. Gardens thrived, children's education progressed, and community initiatives flourished. Luxury was evident in every deliberate choice. The careful design of spaces, the nurturing of relationships, the cultivation of knowledge, and the deliberate planning of wealth and influence. Adeline herself became a quiet figure of authority, her presence commanding respect without demanding attention. She traveled occasionally, always with purpose, meeting with allies and mentors who could enhance her family's security and growth. Yet, she never left the compound entirely. Understanding that true luxury lies in the ability to control one's environment, and to protect what is most valuable. Evenings were spent with her family gathered under the mango trees. Beckett and Iris shared lessons, Wren chattered in her way, and Adeline reflected on the journey from humiliation to triumph. She thought of Edith, the old woman at the crossroads, whose guidance had arrived at the precise moment when patience, courage, and action aligned. Luxury, Adeline realized, was as much internal as it was external. It was the peace of knowing your life is designed intentionally, the power to protect your loved ones, the capacity to cultivate influence without resorting to force, and the ability to navigate storms without losing integrity or focus. Sterling remained by her side, quiet, reliable and respectful, a partner in strategy and purpose, but never intrusion. Together, they ensured that the children grew not just wealthy or comfortable, but wise, capable, and resilient, ready to inherit not just property, but the deliberate cultivation of power and influence. Years passed. The compound became a legacy. Adeline's children grew into strong, capable individuals, each embodying lessons of patience, strategy, and resilience. Beckett excelled in leadership and innovation, Iris became a scholar and advocate for the community, and Wren showed an early brilliance and courage that promised to redefine the family's influence in the region. Adeline watched them all, pride tempered by humility, understanding that luxury was not an endpoint but a continuous practice, a lifestyle of intentionality, integrity, and foresight. Rowan was never seen again. Celeste's name faded from conversations. The past existed only as lessons, foundations for strength, and reminders that the deliberate pursuit of truth and strategy always triumph over deceit and malice. Adeline's home, her family, and her legacy became the true measure of luxury, a life of security, influence, and dignity that no force could unsettle. On a final quiet evening, Adeline stood on the porch, the children around her, Sterling nearby, the sky painted in shades of gold and crimson. The soft marine rain began to fall once more, gentle, almost reverent. She tilted her face up and let it touch her skin, feeling the calm, the victory. The certainty that everything stolen or threatened had been returned and elevated. Luxury was hers, not by inheritance or accident, but by design, patience, and courage. She smiled fully, deeply, because she had earned it. The crossroads, the rain, the storm, the betrayal, all had led her here. The journey was complete. But the life she had built would continue to flourish, a testament to resilience, strategic foresight, and the deliberate pursuit of truth. Luxury, she realized, is the mastery of one's story. Adeline's story had been reclaimed, mastered, and secured for generations to come.